I wasn't supposed to be back home this early. The original plan was to stay in the city, work part-time, and catch up on a few online summer courses. But when my internship got postponed and my lease ended sooner than expected, I found myself tossing my duffel into the back of my car and heading toward the suburbs, where the streets were quiet, the lawns always freshly mowed, and the rooms still smelled faintly like childhood. Mom was already halfway out the door when I arrived. "Sorry, baby. I really tried to reschedule the trip," she said as she tossed a suitcase into the trunk. "But they moved the conference up. It's just a few days." I stocked the fridge and left some cash by the coffee maker. "Yeah, it's fine," I said, hugging her briefly. "Honestly, I could use a quiet week." She gave me a look, the kind that suggested she didn't quite buy it, and then added almost casually, "Oh, and Julie's staying here while I'm gone, just for a bit." Julie. I hadn't heard that name in years, but it clicked instantly. She was Mom's college friend, used to visit once in a while when I was a teenager. I remembered a lot of loud laughing in the kitchen, shared wine bottles, and the scent of perfume lingering in the hallway after she left. I hadn't seen her since I turned 18. Now, apparently, she was in town again. Fresh out of a long-term relationship, according to Mom. Needed a place to crash while her new apartment got finished. "She's not a guest," Mom had added as she slid into the driver's seat. "Treat her like family, right?" I waved her off and carried my stuff upstairs, trying not to think too much about what that meant. I didn't see Julie until the next morning. I had slept in, still adjusting to the sudden change of pace. I padded down to the kitchen in nothing but a t-shirt and boxers, half awake, half hoping for coffee, and that's when I heard her humming. She stood by the stove in a fitted tank top and loose pajama shorts, stirring something in a small pot. Her hair was tied in a lazy bun, a few strands framing her neck. She looked over her shoulder when she heard me. "Good morning," she said with a slight smile. "Morning?" I muttered, suddenly aware of my bare legs. "You grew up?" she added, turning back to the stove like she hadn't just dropped that bomb casually. "Last time I saw you, you had braces and a bad haircut." I smirked. "Thanks for that vivid reminder." She chuckled softly. "I meant it in a good way. You filled out." There was something about the way she said it. Not inappropriate exactly, but not either. She handed me a mug without asking how I took it. The coffee was perfect. She sat across from me, one leg tucked under the other, elbow resting on the table, stirring her tea like she had nowhere else to be. We talked. Nothing heavy, just updates. What I was studying, where she'd been living, why she moved back, how temporary this setup was. "It's just for a few weeks," she said. "I'm not trying to invade your space." "You're not," I replied. "It's nice, actually, not being completely alone in the house." She smiled at that, a small, quiet smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. That first day was calm, domestic even. She puttered around the kitchen, rearranged some cabinets, folded laundry on the couch while I watched a game. Every now and then, I'd catch her glancing at me, not lingering but thoughtful. It didn't mean anything, probably. The next few days passed in a rhythm. She'd make coffee in the morning. I'd fix small things around the house Mom had been ignoring. The curtain rod in the guest room, a squeaky cabinet door, a leaky hose in the backyard. Julie would hover nearby, sometimes helping, sometimes just watching. She wore the kind of casual clothes that didn't ask for attention, but got it anyway. Loose shirts that clung just slightly when she moved. Shorts that rode a little higher when she reached up for something. Always barefoot, always humming something low under her breath. And me? I tried not to look, tried not to notice, but I did. Of course I did. I blamed the house, the quiet, the strange intimacy of shared spaces with someone who wasn't quite family. Someone I used to know as a grown-up, now moving through the house like she belonged in it, and maybe she did. One night, we ate dinner together. Nothing fancy, just pasta and red wine from a bottle that had been sitting too long. We talked about films, music, old road trips. She laughed easily, and I found myself leaning in without realizing. After the dishes were done, she turned to me at the sink and said, "It's weird, isn't it?" "What is?" "Being adults now, you and me, in the same house." I blinked. "Yeah, I guess it is." She dried her hands and gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Not flirtatious, but not neutral either. It held something, some silent calculation. And then she said, lightly, "Guess we'll just have to make it work." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the way she'd said that. Thinking about her voice, her smile, the way her fingers brushed mine when she handed me a towel earlier in the day. None of it meant anything, probably, but I was already past the point of pretending it didn't feel like something was beginning to stir. The next morning started like the others, quiet, slow, sunlight pouring in through the kitchen window, the scent of coffee already in the air. Julie was always up before me, always dressed in something casual but clean, always acting like this was the most natural thing in the world. She'd left the sliding door open to let the breeze in, and her playlist floated through the house. Soft acoustic stuff, the kind that felt like background music in a dream. I stepped into the kitchen in joggers and a t-shirt, hair still a mess, and she looked up from her cup. "You sleep like the dead," she said, grinning. "Only when I know someone else is making the coffee." She rolled her eyes but slid my mug toward me anyway. The cup was warm in my hands, grounding. Her shirt that day was gray and a little oversized, falling off one shoulder. She wasn't wearing a bra, that much was clear. I tried not to let my eyes linger. I really did. "I was thinking," she said, tapping her fingernail against the rim of her mug. "That drawer in the laundry room? The one that sticks." "Yeah. Think you can fix it?" I nodded. "I'll take a look after I eat." She stood then, slowly, and walked across the kitchen to the pantry. That's when it happened. She bent over to grab something low, a box of cereal maybe, and I caught myself staring. Not intentionally, not even for long, but long enough. Her shirt rose just slightly, revealing a sliver of her lower back. Her shorts were soft, hugging the curve of her hips. She didn't move quickly, didn't reach and stand up in one smooth motion like most people would. She stayed there for a beat too long, and then, without turning around, she said it. "Like what you see?" My throat went dry. She turned her head slightly over her shoulder, just enough for me to catch her smirk. Her eyes didn't look surprised. They looked amused. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She straightened up slowly, box in hand, and walked back to the counter like the moment hadn't just cracked the entire atmosphere of the room. "You want toast?" she asked, casual again. I nodded wordlessly, still catching up with what had just happened. We didn't speak about it. Not directly, but everything shifted after that. I could feel it in the way she moved, in the way she watched me when she thought I wasn't looking. Like a game had started, but I wasn't sure of the rules. Later that day, I was in the laundry room, pulling the drawer out with a screwdriver, trying to focus. I heard her footsteps behind me, slow and measured. "You need anything?" I asked without looking up. "No," she said softly. "Just watching." I turned. She leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She didn't say anything else, just stood there, looking at me. I went back to the drawer, trying to ignore how aware I suddenly was of her presence, how close she was, how quiet the house had become. "I used to hate doing laundry," she said after a while. "Still do, honestly. I don't mind it, I replied, keeping my tone even. It's repetitive, kind of peaceful. She smiled faintly. Funny. That's how I'd describe you, too. I blinked, unsure how to respond. Peaceful, she repeated, but not boring. Then she turned and walked away. I sat there for a moment, screwdriver in hand, heart beating faster than it should have. That night, I tried reading on the couch. She came in wearing one of those long, loose sweaters that barely passed her thighs. She curled up on the far end, legs folded beneath her, a mug of tea in hand. We watched a movie or pretended to. I don't think either of us really paid attention to the screen. Her presence was louder than the dialogue, more vivid than anything playing out in front of us. At some point, her leg brushed mine. Just a little, just enough to notice. Neither of us moved. The contact stayed. The silence stretched. I shifted slightly, pretending to adjust the pillow behind me. She didn't pull away. "You always this quiet?" she asked, her voice barely above the hum of the TV. "Only when I'm trying to be careful." "Careful?" she echoed, sipping her tea. "Of what?" I looked at her then. She was watching me over the rim of her mug. Calm, curious, maybe even inviting something. "Lines," I said. She smiled faintly and looked away. "What if the lines aren't where you think they are?" I didn't answer. The air in the room felt thick, like it had weight, like we were suspended in something that wasn't quite safe, but wasn't dangerous either. Just undefined, on edge. When the movie ended, she didn't rush off to bed like usual. She stayed a while, sipping the last of her tea, then set the cup down slowly. "You're good company," she said. "You too." She stood up, the hem of her sweater shifting slightly as she stretched. "Well," she said, "try not to dream too loudly." And with that, she padded down the hallway, barefoot, her sweater swaying with every step. She didn't look back. I stared at the dark screen for a long time after she was gone. Every moment we'd shared today looped in my mind. The way she bent in front of me, the smirk, the question, the contact on the couch, the look in her eyes when she asked about being careful. This wasn't my imagination anymore. Something was happening. Something neither of us was saying out loud. And the worst part? I didn't want it to stop. I tried to keep my distance the next day. Tried being the key word. I stayed in my room longer than usual, browsed my laptop without really reading anything, even cleaned the windows in the guest room just to avoid going downstairs too early. But Julie was everywhere. Not in an intrusive way, just quietly present. Like gravity. You didn't notice it until you tried to ignore it. She didn't mention the night before. Didn't bring up the couch or the glance or the way her leg had rested against mine for what felt like forever. She just moved around the house like usual, barefoot, humming, occasionally asking if I needed anything. And then, just before lunch, I found a note on the kitchen counter in her handwriting. "If you're not planning on hiding in your room all day, I could use a second pair of hands in the garage." No smiley face, no signature. I held the note longer than I needed to, then crumpled it and tossed it in the trash. 10 minutes later, I was in the garage. The air was warmer there, smelling of cardboard, dust, and motor oil. A few unopened boxes sat near the back wall. Julie stood by a shelf, wearing tight jeans and a black tank top, her hair pulled into a high bun. She glanced over her shoulder when she heard me. "Didn't think you'd come." "I was already bored," I said. "Good," she replied, turning back to the shelves. "You can lift the heavy stuff." We worked in silence for a while, stacking, sorting, shifting seasonal decorations and old junk Mom had probably forgotten about. Occasionally, our hands would brush, and each time it happened, something tightened in my chest. At one point, She leaned over to lift a plastic bin, and I instinctively moved to grab it from the other side. Our fingers met on the handle and we both froze. Her eyes met mine across the top of the box. Close, intense, unblinking. Neither of us let go right away. "I can carry it," she said quietly. "I know." But I didn't let go. Neither did she. Eventually, she exhaled slowly and backed off, letting me take the bin. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. After we finished, she wiped her hands on her jeans and said, "Want lunch?" I nodded, throat dry. We ate sandwiches at the counter, barely speaking. The silence between us wasn't awkward anymore. It was charged, like we were both aware of the thing hanging between us, and how close we were to touching it. That night, she suggested a movie again. "I'll pick something lighter," she said with a smirk. "No tension, no complicated characters. Just something stupid and easy." "Sounds good," I replied, though nothing felt easy anymore. She curled up on the same couch, this time in a long white t-shirt that hung off one shoulder, and I sat at the other end. There was space between us, maybe a foot, maybe less, but it felt like the width of the universe. Halfway through the movie, she reached for her tea, and her knee grazed mine again. This time, she didn't pretend it didn't happen. She left it there. No apology, no glance, just contact. I didn't move. The heat from her skin spread through my leg like a wire pulled taut. The movie kept playing, but I couldn't have told you what it was about. My mind was locked on that one point of connection. When the credits rolled, she didn't get up right away. She sat still, her fingers running absent-mindedly over the rim of her empty mug. Then, softly, "You're quiet again." I looked at her. I don't know what to say. She turned toward me, one leg folding under the other, her knee still against mine. "Maybe you don't need to say anything." Our eyes met again, longer this time. I wasn't sure who leaned in first. Maybe neither of us did. But suddenly the space between us didn't exist anymore. Her shoulder brushed mine, and she didn't pull back. Her eyes searched mine, and her breath caught, just slightly. Then she stood, just like that, pulled away from the moment like someone slowly stepping out of a current. "I'm gonna head to bed," she said, voice quiet. I nodded. "Okay." She didn't look at me as she walked toward the hallway, but just before turning the corner, she paused. "I'm not trying to play games," she said. "I know." She lingered there, hand resting lightly against the wall. "Then maybe stop pretending like we don't both feel it." And with that, she disappeared down the hall. I sat on the couch for a long time, the room dark except for the soft glow from the TV menu screen. My heart felt like it had been rewired, like everything I knew about this house, this week, this woman had shifted. She wasn't teasing. She wasn't unsure. She knew. And now I did too. When I finally got up, the house was still. Her bedroom door was closed, a strip of warm light peeking out beneath it. I hesitated, then kept walking, past the door, down the hall, into my own room. I didn't lock it, but I didn't sleep either. The sheets felt too warm, the air too still. Every breath I took felt full of the moment that hadn't happened, and the one that nearly had. In the middle of the night, I thought I heard her footsteps. Soft, bare, slow. They passed by my door, then stopped. I held my breath, but they didn't linger, and eventually they faded. Whatever this was, it wasn't over, but it also wasn't rushing anywhere. It was waiting, brewing, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold still. The morning came slow and warm. Light poured through the windows in soft stripes, warming the wooden floors and the backs of my hands as I rubbed the sleep, or lack of it, from my eyes. The house was silent again, but not empty, not cold, just waiting. I stepped into the hallway barefoot. Her door was open. In the kitchen, She stood at the counter, her back to me, wearing a long navy t-shirt that clung gently to her waist. She was barefoot too, a strand of hair slipping from her bun and curling behind her ear. She didn't turn when I entered. "Coffee's fresh," she said. Her voice was even, but not flat. There was warmth in it, familiarity, and something quieter beneath that. "Thanks," I said, reaching for a mug. We moved around each other like we had for days, passing plates, stirring spoons, sharing space. But something was different, not in our movements, but in the air between them. Like the tension wasn't crackling anymore. It was humming. We ate toast and fruit at the table. Her fingers traced the edge of her mug while I watched the condensation gather on my glass of juice. After a while, she said, "You sleep okay?" I looked at her. She looked at me. "Not really." She nodded like she expected that. Me neither. The silence that followed didn't need to be broken. But she broke it anyway. "You want to get out of the house today?" I blinked. "Like, go somewhere?" "There's a walking path not far from here," she said. "Figured we could stretch our legs. Clear our heads." Clear our heads. I almost smiled. "Yeah," I said. "Okay." We left the house a little after noon. The day was cloudy but warm, with a breeze that carried the scent of early summer. Cut grass, warm pavement, distant barbecue. The walking path was mostly empty. A few joggers, a woman with a stroller. No one who'd look twice at us. We walked in silence for a while. Not uncomfortable, not aimless. She walked beside me, arms crossed loosely, sunglasses perched on her head. Every now and then, the wind caught the hem of her shirt, lifting it slightly. She didn't seem to notice, or maybe she didn't care. Then, without looking at me, she said, "I didn't plan any of this." My throat tightened, but I nodded. "I know." She glanced over. "Do you?" I met her eyes. "Yeah." She breathed out slowly, like she'd been holding it in. "It's not just you," she said. "You didn't imagine it." "I know that now," I said. "But I kept thinking maybe I wanted it so badly I made it up." "You didn't." The path curved around a small pond. Ducks floated lazily in the water, and the wind rustled the trees overhead. "I've been careful for so long," she said. "Always doing the right thing, the expected thing." I didn't interrupt. She continued, "And then you walked into the kitchen looking like, not a boy, not someone I used to know, just someone, present, calm, a man." My heart pounded, but I kept walking, letting her speak. I kept telling myself it was just temporary, that I'd leave before it got too close, before you noticed. "I noticed," I said quietly. "I know." We reached a bench under a tree. She sat. I followed. She folded her hands in her lap, looking down at them. "I don't know what this is," she said. "I don't even know what it could be." I watched her. "But I don't want to lie to myself anymore," she added. "And I don't want to make you lie either." I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Our fingers fit together more naturally than I expected. Her palm was warm, soft, steady. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "I just needed to know I wasn't the only one who felt this." "You're not." She looked up then, and the expression in her eyes wasn't seductive. It wasn't teasing. It was real, open, like she'd finally stopped holding her breath. "Then what do we do now?" she asked. I thought for a moment. "We don't ruin it," I said. "We don't pretend, but we don't push it either." Her lips parted slightly, then curved into the smallest smile. "You're more careful than I expected. You said that like it's a bad thing." "It's not," she said. "It's why I let it get this far." We sat there in the quiet for a while longer. I didn't check my phone. She didn't either. The breeze moved around us like it approved. Eventually, we stood, walked back to the house. No big words, no promises, just steps. Later that evening, I cooked dinner. She opened a bottle of wine. We moved around the kitchen like we'd been doing it for years. She told me stories about her college days with my mom. I told her about my worst professor. She laughed until she had to sit down. And then, after the dishes were done and the sun dipped low behind the fence, she turned to me in the hallway. "Do you want to come sit with me?" she asked. I nodded. We sat on the couch. No TV, no music, just us. Her legs curled under her again, and this time, she leaned into my side gently. Her head rested against my shoulder like it belonged there, like it had been there before in another life we hadn't talked about. I didn't ask what this meant. She didn't offer a label. She just whispered, "I'm glad you came home early." I turned my head slightly, enough to rest my cheek against her hair. "Me too." A long silence followed. Then she added, with a voice so quiet I almost missed it, "I meant it, you know? That morning in the kitchen." I knew exactly what she was referring to. When I asked if you liked what you saw, I smiled into the stillness. "I did." She looked up at me then. Not shy, not bold, just honest. "So did I." And that was it. No kiss, no dramatic gesture, just shared truth, shared breath, a moment that didn't need anything else. When she stood up to go to bed, she paused at the hallway. Her voice was soft. "If you ever look at me like that again, don't look away next time." And then she was gone.